Chuck's Garage is back for part 2 of our LS engine swap. Today, we'll take the factory intake off and replace it with a high-performance intake and throttle body.
Hi, I'm Chuck Hansen. Welcome to another episode of Chuck's Garage and our LS engine swap into this classic Chevelle chassis. Now, if you caught the last episode, you might remember that we snagged an 03 Tahoe 5.3 LS engine out of a wrecked Tahoe. And we mated it with a 4L60E transmission that a buddy of mine rebuilt. And we've installed it all in place using a stock cross member, but we used motor mount adapter plates from Hooker, and we used an oil pan that came from the folks at Holley. Now, we had plenty of oil pan clearance here, and or at least that's what I thought, until I started getting emails from some of you guys. Now, some of the emails concern themselves with the clearance issues from the steering linkage up to the oil pan here. Let me show you what we're talking about. Now, as you can see, when this thing goes lock to lock, it makes contact here with the steering linkage and the oil pan with that grease zerk there. Now, even with the grease zerk out, you still make contact, and believe it or not, it's even worse on the other side. Yeah, well, now this interference problem only seems to make itself known on GMA body cars, the ones with the front steering linkage, and 64 to 72 A bodies is what I'm talking about. That'd be the Chevelles, Tempests, Skylarks, that kind of a car. And well, believe it or not, Holley has already been made aware of that problem, and they're working on a modified oil pan already. In fact, perhaps by the time you see this video, the parts will already be in the pipeline. So, well, today, what we got planned is we're going to go ahead and swap out this intake here. I told you about that last time. And we're going to plumb our fuel system, get all that stuff ready to go. And, well, I don't know what else we can say. It's time to get our hands dirty. Now, that stock intake really isn't too bad a piece. It's a composite, so it's lightweight, and it works pretty well through a fairly broad RPM range. But it's black and it's ugly. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace it with some cool pieces from Holley here. What we've got here is a mid-ram intake, and this thing is configured for a single throttle body. We're going to hang a 90mm throttle body on there, but since we also have planned some upgrades for the engine later on, perhaps a camshaft swap, a head swap, and that sort of thing, that's going to boost our horsepower rating, so we wanted an intake that would lend itself to those modifications as well. Now, this is a really cool intake. Let me show you some of its really cool features. All right, now this is the Plenum top that we're going to be using. You can see where it's got the single throttle body mounting here. But this intake is also for LS1s, LS2s, and LS6s with the cathedral port heads on it. Now, anything else than that, you're probably going to have to go hunting another intake. But anyway, that's what the top looks like. Now, this plate here comes right off. Check that out. Now, what you've got here is an intake that is machined and set up for a pair of 4150 style throttle bodies. You can tell this is for injection because it's got these two stands here for the fuel rails and the machine ports for the injectors themselves. Now, believe it or not, if you're not into fuel injection, this intake is also offered in a carbureted version, and it doesn't have the bungs for the injectors or the stands for the fuel rails here, and you can just mount carburetors right up on top of there. You'll be good to go. But no matter what your application, this is a great all-around intake here. Now, to finish out the top side of the engine here, what we've got is a pair of fuel rails here for the injectors. They just mount up on the intake there. Here's that 90mm throttle body I was telling you about. Now, this thing is massive, and I'll show you later on after I get that old throttle body off just how it compares. This thing will feed a substantial amount of horsepower. And then we've got the Holley fuel pump here. Now, this is an inline. It's nice and quiet. It doesn't make that pulsing, pumping noise that a lot of them do. It's a gear rotor design, and it's designed to work in conjunction with our whole fuel system here. And of course, we've got the regulator here that's going to allow us to fine-tune our pressure requirements to the fuel injectors. That's it. I guess our next step is to get that old intake off of there. Before we can bolt that Holley intake up, though, we got to do a little bit of prep work. Now, if you'll notice, right on the bottom side of the mating flange here, there are some receiver grooves. And in those grooves, we have to put these little O-rings here that come in the kit with the intake manifold. Yeah, now in order to hold these little O-rings in place, what we're going to do is just put a little dab of grease on them. About like that there. Just regular all-purpose grease will be just fine. We'll just put enough on there to kind of give it a light coating. That ought to be enough. And then we'll just kind of press it into place right here, and that grease ought to hold the O-ring where it needs to be. There we go. Now we just redo that same process for all 8 cylinders, and we're ready to go. Well, all right, that takes care of all of the O-rings, and they went on there pretty nicely. A little dab of grease holds them in place, and well, I guess we're ready to throw this intake on the motor. That looks good. Now, this Holley intake is held in place with 10 M6 bolts. As you can see, it's a fairly small bolt, which means they won't take a lot of abuse. You don't want to over torque these things. So what we're going to do right now is just hand start them, and then we'll snug them down. And when we snug them down, there's even a specific pattern that you want to use. You start from the middle, go across, over here, back across again. Basically, you work your way from the inside out in a circling pattern there. And we'll just snug them down like that, and then we'll get the torque wrench out. But now with this intake torqued down properly, we're ready for the gaskets that go between the intake manifold and the plenum base. Now, just like before, we're just going to use a little bit of grease to kind of hold these things in place so we can get things cinched down. There we go. A little bit more here. That'll be plenty to hold it in place. Well, the plenum base is next. Got the gaskets in place there. So we'll just set this down. Now here's something I want to bring to your attention. You'll notice right here on the back of the plenum base, there's some ports here. These are vacuum ports that we'll use later on, but one thing you want to make sure is they're at the back of the engine. Again, we'll just start these bolts and we'll just snug them down. And when you torque these down, it's basically a specific pattern that Holley recommends. And you start from the inside, and you go to the outer corners. You get them torqued down. And that'll be good to go. All right, well, that plenum base is ready to go. And we're almost ready for the lid, but before we can do that, there's just a little more prep work that we've got to do. Now, Holley includes this length of O-ring material here. As you can see, it's kind of an open-ended deal. The reason for that is there's a receiver groove down here in the base, and we just lay it down in there, and then we cut it to length and glue it, and then it's ready to go. All right, now what we've done here is we're using a little bit of grease again just to hold this thing in place, so we can get it to where the two ends made up. And once we get it to that point, we're going to go ahead and trim it to the proper length and glue the two halves of the O-ring rope together. All right, we're sneaking up on it here. And we'll just put a little glue in that joint and we'll be good to go. Now, the Holley instructions say to glue the ends of that O-ring gasket together with some super glue, which we've already done. And we've got it already back into the receiver groove. Now, it tells you to finish up with a little dab of some ATV there, just to make sure that you get a real good seal there. And that's what we'll do, right on that spot right there. That looks pretty good. And now we're ready for that lid. Well, you know, not everything goes the way you plan it to sometimes, and here's something I want to show you here. Now, we put all of the Plenum lid bolts in, except this last one here, and as you can see, there's some interference here between the boss that mounts the fuel rail later on and the head of the bolt here. So what we're going to have to do is we're just going to have to get the old trusty file out, dress that down a little bit there, and give us the clearance that we need. Well, the injectors are the next thing that we're going to install, and we have to rob them off of the factory intake here. So in order to do that, we have to remove the fuel rails here. A couple of bolts hold them on, and then we can pop the injectors out of there, and then we'll take that throttle body off there as well. You know, they say when all else fails, you ought to read the instructions, and it's amazing what you can learn when you actually do that. Now, I went ahead and found the section here that says the 300-121 intake fuel rail kit is designed to accept Bosch-style EV1 or Magneti Marelli Pico fuel injectors. We tried to use the OE ones that came off that original Tahoe intake. It says here the OE LS fuel injectors may not fit properly in the EFI manifold and fuel rail assembly. So I guess I got to go and pick up a set of new injectors. Well, quick trip to the speed shop and I've got what we need. These are some 30-pound high impedance injectors from Holley. I'll tell you what, I'm going to slip them in place. We ought to be good to go. Well, now, let me show you what the difference is in these two injectors here, just so you can get an idea of what the height difference is and what was causing us the problems. You know, obviously the Holley is going to be considerably taller. Now, there is a kit, they say, that allows you to use the stock LS7 type injectors if that's what you're working with, but it also requires some drilling and some other modifications. For us, way easier to go ahead and procure a set of the Holley injectors and use them instead. Oh, much better this time. You know, I was reading a little bit on those 30-pound injectors that I got from Holley there, and well, it said that they'll feed up to 480 horsepower, which ought to be more than enough for what we've got in mind. Even with a camshaft and a head change, I think we'll be lucky to be pushing 500 horsepower at that point. But here's something I wanted to show you. Now, I took the old throttle body off of the old LS engine there. This is it. This is what comes on that intake manifold from GM. And here is the throttle body that we're going to replace it with. Now, this is the one that'll go on that mid-ram intake there. And this is a 90 millimeter. I wanted to show you what the difference is going to be. Now, you know, Stevie Wonder could tell the difference between these two here, but this is pretty impressive right here. 90 millimeters, and this will definitely feed up to that 480 horsepower. And if we need to, I think it'll go beyond that. If we need to, we can go ahead and throw some bigger injectors in there to take care of the horsepower requirements. We're ready to slip this thing on. But I did want to remind you that this throttle body has to be ordered separately from the intake. Now, this one is a 90 millimeter, as I said, but I hear rumors that they've got a 105 in the works, which ought to be available here shortly. Now, we'll just stack the gasket on here. We have the hardware in place, and we'll just tighten it up. That ought to be tight enough. Well, now we're ready for our throttle position sensor and our IAC valve. Now, you might recall that we got our 5.3 out of an 03 Tahoe, which is a drive-by-wire setup. The throttle body that we got from Holley, however, uses an actual throttle cable. So what we're going to have to do is find the IAC valve and the throttle position sensor off of like a 2001 Camaro or Firebird with an LS1 engine in it. Those parts should be readily available, and well, since I'm going to have to make another run to the parts store, looks like right here would be a good place to stop for today. You'll want to check back with me soon, though, because next time I'm going to show you how I'm going to rig up the rest of that fuel system there. I'll see you soon.
Tune in next time for part 3 as we continue with our LS engine swap project car.